Every Friday at 6 o'clock, my daughter called. For 10 years, without fail. Last Friday, the phone stayed silent. I'm Dorothy Mitchell, 63 years old, and I've spent the last 40 years of my life understanding one simple truth. When something stops working the way it should, there's always a reason. I learned that fixing electrical circuits in houses all over Tennessee. My late husband James used to say I had a sixth sense for trouble. Could feel it in the air before I could see it with my eyes. That Friday evening, I was sitting at my kitchen table with my coffee going cold in the mug my daughter Elizabeth gave me 15 years ago. World's Best Mom, printed on the side in purple letters, her favorite color since she was 6. The clock on my wall, the same one James installed in 1985, ticked past 5:58. 2 minutes. The phone sat silent on the counter. Old cream-colored landline I've had since the 90s. Still works perfectly. Why replace something that isn't broken? 6 o'clock came and went. Then 6:05. Then 6:15. I picked up the receiver, heard the dial tone, set it back down. Nothing wrong with the line. So I dialed Elizabeth's number, the one I memorized the day she moved into her own place 11 years ago after she married Ryan Carter. It rang, and rang, and rang. Then her voicemail, that cheerful voice. Hi, you've reached Elizabeth. I can't come to the phone right now, but leave a message and I'll call you back. Hey, sweetheart, I said, keeping my voice steady even though my hands weren't. Just checking in since I didn't hear from you. Give me a call when you get a chance. I hung up and told myself she was busy. Late shift at regional hospital, probably. Elizabeth worked hard, sometimes pulled 12-hour days when they were short-staffed. She'd call back soon, except she always called on Fridays. Always. Even when she was exhausted. Even when little Sophia was sick. Even during that terrible flu season 3 years ago when she'd been working doubles for 2 weeks straight. 6 o'clock every Friday, like clockwork. Something about this felt wrong. You spend 40 years working with electricity. You develop a sense for when something's off. That prickling at the base of your skull when you're staring at a circuit that looks perfectly normal. But you just know there's a short somewhere waiting to cause trouble. That's what this felt like. I tried calling again at 7. Voicemail. 8 o'clock. Voicemail. 9 o'clock, straight to voicemail this time. Phone was off or dead. By midnight, after 7 unanswered calls, I was standing at my kitchen window looking out at the empty street, the streetlights casting orange pools on the pavement. My coffee had gone cold hours ago. The house felt too quiet. The kind of quiet that settles in after James passed. The kind I'd learned to live with but never quite got used to. Somewhere out there, 2.5 hours north, my daughter wasn't answering her phone. My granddaughter Sophia wasn't asking me when she could visit next weekend like she always did. I thought about Ryan then, my son-in-law. Something had felt off about him for weeks now, maybe longer. The way his eyes shifted when I asked about work 3 weeks ago when Sophia visited. The tight, practiced tone in his voice, like someone reading from a script. 40 years as an electrician teaches you to spot the signs. The little inconsistencies, the things that don't quite add up. I set the phone back in its cradle one last time and stood there in my kitchen at midnight, feeling that familiar prickling at the base of my skull getting stronger. By the time gray light filtered through my curtains the next morning, I still hadn't slept. I'd already made my decision. I was going to drive to Elizabeth's house, and whatever I found there would change everything. I just didn't know I was already 6 days too late. Let me tell you who I am, because it matters to what happened next. Dorothy Louise Mitchell. Born in Memphis in 1962, raised by my grandmother after my mother passed when I was 8. Grandmother taught me 2 things, trust in the Lord and trust your hands to do good work. She cleaned houses for white families in East Memphis, came home with hands raw from bleach and lye soap, but she never complained. She said honest work was its own reward. I met James Mitchell when I was 19, working the register at a hardware store on Poplar Avenue. He came in looking for wire cutters and left with my phone number. We married 6 months later in a small ceremony at Beale Street Baptist Church, my grandmother crying happy tears in the front row. James was an electrician. For our first anniversary, instead of jewelry, he gave me a tool belt and said, "Dorothy, you've got steady hands and a sharp mind. Let me teach you something useful." So I learned how to strip wire, how to read a circuit, how to trace a problem back to its source. "Everything connects," James would say, running his finger along a wire. You just have to follow it back to where it started. We worked together for 15 years, Mitchell and Mitchell Electric, fixing faulty wiring in houses all over Shelby County. I was one of only 3 black women electricians in Memphis at the time. Some customers would see me show up and ask when the real electrician was coming. I'd smile, fix their problem in half the time they expected, and collect my check. Let them underestimate me. I was used to it. Elizabeth came along when I was 26. Beautiful baby girl with James's smile and my stubborn streak. I remember holding her in the hospital, counting her tiny fingers, promising her a better life than I'd had. Promising she'd never have to prove herself to anyone. I kept working until Elizabeth was in school, then I stayed home to be there when she got off the bus. James kept the business going. We did all right. Not rich, but comfortable. Paid our mortgage, sent Elizabeth to good schools, took her to church every Sunday at Greater Hope Baptist. Elizabeth was smart, top of her class, got a full scholarship to nursing school at the University of Tennessee. I was so proud I could barely breathe during her graduation, watching her walk across that stage in her cap and gown. I want to help people the way you and Daddy fix things, she told me that night, sitting on our back porch watching the sunset. Make them work again when they're broken. I hugged her tight and told her she was going to change lives. James passed 8 years ago. Heart attack, sudden and cruel. One minute he was laughing at something on TV, the next minute he was gone. I held his hand in the hospital and felt his wedding ring still warm against my palm. After that, it was just me in our house on Oakwood Avenue. Me and those Friday phone calls from Elizabeth. Me and the weekend visits from Sophia, my precious granddaughter who loved to follow me around the garage, asking questions just like her mama used to. Grandma Dorothy, why does this wire go here? Because everything connects, baby. You just have to trace it back to the source. That's who I am. A woman who knows how to find where things went wrong. And that Saturday morning, driving north toward my daughter's house, I knew something had gone very, very wrong. Elizabeth met Ryan Carter 11 years ago at a hospital fundraiser. She was 29, working night shifts in the ICU. He was a financial advisor, smooth-talking, handsome, with an easy confidence that some women found charming. I found it suspicious. They married 6 months later in a ceremony that felt rushed to me, though I never said so out loud. What kind of mother ruins her daughter's happiness by voicing doubts? So I smiled, hugged Ryan when he became my son-in-law, and told myself I was being overprotective. But I noticed things. Small things. The kind of things you notice when you've spent 40 years checking circuits for faults. The wedding was the first time I felt it, that prickling sensation at the base of my skull. Ryan stood at the altar in his rented tuxedo, smiling at Elizabeth with perfect white teeth. But his eyes, they were calculating something, like he was closing a deal, not making a vow. When I hugged Elizabeth before she walked down the aisle, I whispered, "You're sure about this, baby?" She pulled back, gave me that look she'd had since she was 16. "Mama, I love him. Isn't that enough?" I smoothed her veil and said, "As long as you're happy, sweetheart." But I wasn't sure. And over the next 11 years, those small doubts grew into bigger ones. 3 years ago, Ryan told us he was at a business conference in Atlanta, called from the hotel, said he was in back-to-back meetings. But when Sophia came to visit that weekend, she mentioned casually, "Daddy was home all weekend watching football. We had pizza 3 times. I almost said something. Almost. But then I thought maybe Sophia got her days mixed up. She was only 7. Kids get confused about time. Looking back now, I realized that was the first time Ryan practiced lying to us. The money problems started showing about 6 months ago, though I didn't know that's what they were at the time. Elizabeth's voice on our Friday calls started sounding strained, tight, like a wire pulled too far, close to snapping. "How's Ryan doing?" I'd ask. "He's fine, Mama, just busy with work, lots of new clients." But something in her tone didn't sit right. When I pressed, she'd change the subject. "How's your garden doing? Did you plant those tomatoes yet?" Then 3 weeks ago, Sophia visited for the weekend. We were sitting on my porch steps eating ice cream when she asked me something that still makes my chest tight. "Grandma Dorothy, what do you do when someone lies to you?" I set down my bowl. "Why you asking, baby?" She shrugged, suddenly very interested in her shoelaces. "Just wondering. I should have pushed. Should have asked more questions." But I thought it was just kid drama, some classmate fibbing about a toy or a game. So I gave her the answer I thought she needed. Well, if someone lies to you, you gotta decide if they're worth the truth. Some people aren't ready to be honest, baby. But you always tell the truth, okay? No matter what. She nodded and went back to her ice cream. I wish I'd asked who was lying to her. I wish I'd asked so many things. 2 weeks ago, I drove up to Elizabeth's house unannounced. I'd been feeling that electrical hum in my bones, that sense that something was shorting out. I needed to see her face, not just hear her voice on the phone. She answered the door with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Mama, what are you doing here?" "Just wanted to see my girls." "That a crime?" She let me in, but the house felt wrong. Too clean. Too quiet. Sophia was at school, Ryan at work. We sat in her kitchen drinking sweet tea, and I watched my daughter's hands shake slightly when she lifted her glass. "Elizabeth, baby, what's going on?" "Nothing, Mama. I'm just tired. Work's been—" "Don't lie to me." I said it gentle but firm. "I'm your mother. I know when something's wrong." Her eyes filled with tears. For a moment I thought she'd tell me. I could see her deciding, weighing whether to let me in or keep me safe by keeping me out. Then her phone buzzed. She looked at the screen and the moment passed. "I'm fine," she said, wiping her eyes. "Really, just need to get more sleep." I left that day with a knot in my stomach, but I told myself I was worrying for nothing. Elizabeth was a grown woman. She could handle her own life. That was 2 weeks ago. Now, driving north on the highway at 5:30 in the morning with the sunrise painting the Tennessee hills gold and amber, I replayed every sign I'd missed, every red flag I'd ignored because I didn't want to interfere, didn't want to be the overbearing mother who couldn't let go. James used to say, "When you feel that hum in the air, Dorothy, you don't ignore it. You trace it back. You find the short before the whole house burns down." I should have traced it back sooner. I should have trusted my instincts. But I was about to find out just how badly those circuits had failed, and what it had cost my daughter. That Friday started like any other Friday for the past 10 years. I woke up at 5:30 a.m., made my coffee the way James taught me. Strong enough to stand a spoon in, he used to joke. Did my morning devotional at the kitchen table, reading from the same Bible my grandmother gave me 50 years ago. The margins were filled with her handwriting, little notes and prayers she'd written in pencil. "Lord, give me strength for today," one note said. I traced it with my finger that morning, not knowing how much I'd need those words. The day passed in its usual rhythm. I worked in my garden, pulling weeds from the tomato plants. Went to the grocery store and chatted with Mrs. Patterson from church, who was buying ingredients for her famous peach cobbler. Came home and made myself lunch, leftover chicken and rice. Around 3 o'clock, Grace Thompson called. Elizabeth's best friend from the hospital, known her for 8 years. They worked the same floor, covered each other's shifts when one of them was sick. "Ms. Dorothy," Grace's voice sounded worried. "Have you talked to Elizabeth this week?" "We talk every Friday at 6. Why?" "She hasn't been at work since Monday. Called in sick, but—" Grace hesitated. "I've tried calling her 3 times. She won't answer, won't return my texts." That prickling sensation started at the base of my skull. "Maybe she really is sick," I said, trying to convince myself. "Flu's going around." "Maybe." Grace didn't sound convinced either. "But if you talk to her tonight, tell her I'm worried about her, okay?" I promised I would. The afternoon stretched long. I tried to distract myself with housework, dusted the living room, folded laundry, reorganized my toolbox in the garage. But I kept checking the clock. 4:30, 5 o'clock, 5:30. At 5:45, I poured my coffee into Elizabeth's mug and sat down at the kitchen table to wait. The phone sat on the counter 15 feet away. I stared at it like I could will it to ring through sheer force of wanting. 5:58. My heart started beating faster. 5:59. I picked up the mug, set it down without drinking. 6 o'clock. Silence. 6:05. Still nothing. At 6:15, I got up and checked the phone. Picked up the receiver, heard the dial tone. The line was working fine. The problem wasn't with my phone. I dialed Elizabeth's number. It rang 5 times, then went to voicemail. "Hi, you've reached Elizabeth. I can't come to the phone right now, but leave a message and I'll call you back." Her voice sounded so normal, so alive. I had to close my eyes against the sudden sting of tears. Hey, sweetheart, it's Mama. Just checking in since I didn't hear from you. Give me a call when you get a chance. Love you. I hung up and stood there in my kitchen, listening to the clock tick. Elizabeth had never, not once in 10 years, missed our Friday call without telling me ahead of time. Not when she was sick. Not when she worked a double shift. Not even the time Sophia had the flu and spiked a fever of 103. Elizabeth still called from the pediatrician's office. I tried again at 7. Voicemail. 8 o'clock. Voicemail. 9 o'clock. And this time it went straight to voicemail. Phone was turned off or dead. I called Ryan's number at 9:30. He answered on the third ring, voice smooth and easy. Dorothy, hey, everything okay? That's what I'm trying to figure out. I can't reach Elizabeth. Her phone's going straight to voicemail. A pause. Just a fraction too long. Oh yeah, I should have called you. Elizabeth and Sophia went on a little trip. Mother-daughter time. You know how she's been stressed with work. Every word sounded rehearsed, like he'd practiced this conversation in a mirror. A trip? Where? Just out of town for a few days. They'll be back soon. Put Sophia on the phone. They're not here right now. Out exploring, I think. Ryan. I kept my voice level, though my hands were shaking. Elizabeth never misses our Friday calls, and she hasn't been to work since Monday. Where exactly are they? Like I said, just out of town. I'll have her call you when they get back. He hung up before I could ask anything else. I stood there holding the phone, listening to the dial tone, and I knew with the same certainty I'd felt checking faulty wiring for 40 years, that Ryan Carter was lying to me. I called Regional Hospital next, got transferred to the nursing station on Elizabeth's floor. Hi, this is Dorothy Mitchell, Elizabeth Carter's mother. I'm trying to reach her. Oh, Ms. Mitchell. The nurse sounded genuinely concerned. Elizabeth called in sick Monday morning. We haven't seen her since. Is everything all right? I don't know yet, I said honestly. But I'm going to find out. I hung up and looked at the clock. 10:17 p.m. Too late to drive tonight. But tomorrow, first light, I was heading north. I didn't sleep that night. Just sat in my living room in James's old recliner, watching the hours tick by, praying prayers I couldn't quite put into words. By the time dawn broke across my front windows, painting everything pink and gold, I'd already packed an overnight bag, filled a thermos with coffee, and written a note for Mrs. Patterson in case anyone came looking for me. The note said, "Gone to Elizabeth's. If I'm not back by Sunday, call the police." I tucked it under the sugar bowl on my kitchen table, grabbed my purse and my keys, and walked out to my car. The drive to Elizabeth's house was 2.5 hours. I made it in 2. And when I got there, when I used the spare key she'd given me years ago and stepped into that silent, too-clean house, when I heard that faint scratching sound coming from upstairs, that was the moment my whole world ended. That was the moment I found my 10-year-old granddaughter curled up in a closet, barely alive, after 7 days alone. That was the moment I learned that my daughter, my beautiful, brilliant, loving daughter, was already dead. The smell hit me first when I opened Elizabeth's front door. Not death, not blood, just the stale air of a house that had been closed up too long, like someone had turned off the heat and walked away. The kind of emptiness that settles into walls when nobody's been breathing life into them. I stood in the doorway, my hand still on the key, and called out, "Elizabeth? Sophia?" My voice echoed in the silence. Nothing answered back. The living room looked almost normal at first glance. Almost. But I'd been checking circuits for 40 years, and I knew how to spot what was wrong, even when everything looked right. The coffee table sat at a slight angle, like someone had shoved it aside and then tried to put it back, but didn't get the position quite right. The couch cushions were arranged too perfectly, the kind of perfect that comes from frantic straightening, not natural living. A throw pillow lay on the floor behind the armchair, kicked there and forgotten. I walked deeper into the room, my shoes quiet on the carpet. The vacuum had been run recently. I could see the lines in the pile. But they ran in odd directions, overlapping in places, like someone had cleaned in a hurry without thinking about the pattern. The family photos on the mantel had been moved. I could tell by the dust marks. Someone had knocked them askew, then set them back, but not exactly where they'd been. "Elizabeth?" I called again, louder this time. Still nothing. I moved into the kitchen. My breath caught. The room was spotless. Too spotless. Counter gleaming. Sink shining. Even the stovetop looked freshly scrubbed, Not a grease splatter anywhere. But when I opened the refrigerator, I found only beer bottles. Ryan didn't even drink beer when I knew him. Chinese takeout containers, and a half-gallon of milk with an expiration date 4 days past. No juice boxes, no string cheese, no yogurt tubes or apple slices or any of the things you'd find in a house with a 10-year-old child. I checked the dish towel hanging on the oven handle. Damp. Someone had used it recently. That's when I heard it. A soft sound from upstairs. So faint I almost thought I'd imagined it. Scratch, scratch, pause, scratch, like fingernails against wood. My heart slammed against my ribs. I moved to the stairs, gripping the banister with one hand. The second floor was dark, all the bedroom doors closed. "Sophia?" I called up. "Baby, is that you?" The scratching came again, from the left, from Sophia's room. I took those stairs 2 at a time, my knees protesting, but my fear pushing me forward. When I reached the landing, I grabbed the doorknob to Sophia's room and threw it open. Pink curtains filtered the morning sunlight into a rosy glow. Stuffed animals lined the shelves in perfect rows. A backpack sat in the corner, school folders visible through the open zipper. Everything looked normal, lived in, loved, except for the sound. Scratch, scratch, pause, coming from the closet. I crossed the room in 3 steps and yanked open the closet door. There, curled up behind a pile of winter coats, was Sophia, my grandbaby, my precious girl. Her lips were cracked and bleeding, peeling back from her teeth. Her skin was pale, that grayish pale that comes before the body starts shutting down, except for the fevered flush on her cheeks, bright red like someone had painted it on. Her eyes were glassy, unfocused, barely registering my presence. Her small hands clutched a stuffed bunny to her chest, the same faded blue rabbit Elizabeth had bought her 7 years ago, when Sophia was just 3. Its fur was matted with tears and sweat. "Grandma?" she whispered. Her voice sounded like dry leaves scraping across pavement. I dropped to my knees, actually dropped, my legs just gave out, and gathered her into my arms. She weighed nothing, just bones and burning skin wrapped in a t-shirt and pajama pants. When I pressed my hand to her forehead, the heat scared me. Her breathing came in shallow gasps, each one a struggle. "I've got you, baby," I said, my voice breaking into pieces. "I've got you. Grandma's here." She looked up at me, and for a moment I saw recognition flicker in her eyes. "Grandma?" I heard Mama scream, and then everything went quiet. I pulled out my phone with shaking hands and dialed 911. "911, what's your emergency? I need an ambulance." I tried to keep my voice steady, but it came out rough, desperate. 47 Oakwood Drive. My granddaughter, she's 10 years old. Severe dehydration, high fever. She's been alone for... My voice caught. I couldn't say it. Couldn't make it real by speaking it out loud. "Ma'am, how long has she been alone?" I looked down at Sophia, still clutching that bunny, her lips moving soundlessly. "I don't know. Days. Please hurry." The operator stayed on the line while I held my grandbaby, counting her breaths, praying each one wouldn't be the last. I could hear sirens in the distance within 5 minutes, getting closer. "How long, sweetheart?" I whispered into her hair. "How long have you been in here?" Her answer made my heart stop. "I don't know, Grandma. I stopped counting after 7 days." The ambulance ride to Regional Children's Hospital took 20 minutes. It felt like 20 hours. Sophia drifted in and out of consciousness, her small hand gripping mine like I was the only solid thing left in her world. A young paramedic with kind eyes worked over her, checking vitals, adjusting the oxygen mask over her face. "Severe dehydration," he said, more to his partner than to me. "Malnutrition. This child has been alone for days." I didn't correct him. Didn't say it had been 7 days. Just held my granddaughter's hand and watched her chest rise and fall, each breath a small miracle. The ER was chaos when we arrived. Doctors and nurses surrounded Sophia the moment the doors opened, their movements precise and urgent. They transferred her to a gurney, hooked up IV lines, called out numbers I didn't understand. Someone tried to pull me back, a young nurse with a gentle touch. "Ma'am, we need space to work." "I'm not leaving her," I said, and something in my voice must have made it clear I meant it. A doctor with salt and pepper hair and wire-rimmed glasses looked over at me, then nodded. "Stay against the wall. Don't get in the way." I pressed myself into the corner and watched them save my granddaughter's life. Blood pressure cuff. Temperature check. Blood draws. More IV bags. The numbers slowly improved. The tension in the room gradually eased. After what felt like hours, but was probably 40 minutes, they moved Sophia to a private room. The IV drip continued, steady and rhythmic. Monitors beeped softly, tracking her heartbeat, her oxygen levels, her slow return to the living. I pulled a chair close to her bed and sat down. My whole body ached, from the drive, from the fear, from holding myself together when everything inside me wanted to break apart. 7 days. My 10-year-old granddaughter had survived 7 days alone in that closet. But how? And why? And where was Elizabeth? Sophia stirred about an hour later, her eyes opening slowly. They were clearer now, more focused. She looked at me and I saw real recognition for the first time since I'd found her. "Grandma," she whispered. "I'm here, sweetheart." I squeezed her hand gently, careful not to dislodge the IV. "You're safe now." She was quiet for a moment, her gaze drifting to the stuffed bunny they'd let her keep. It sat on the bedside table, matted and worn, but somehow still comforting. "Mama taught me," she said finally, her voice thin as tissue paper. My throat tightened. "Taught you what, baby?" "In case something bad happened." I pulled my chair closer, leaning in so she wouldn't have to strain to talk. "What did she teach you?" Sophia's eyes filled with tears, but she kept talking. "Maybe a few months ago, maybe since summer, Mama would come into my room at night and tell me things." She paused to catch her breath. The monitors beeped their steady rhythm. "She said if I ever heard loud arguing, really loud, scary arguing, I should go straight to my closet and hide. She said not to come out until you called my name or the police did. Nobody else. Just you or the police." I felt something cold settle in my chest. Elizabeth had known. My daughter had known she was in danger and had prepared her baby girl like someone preparing an escape route. "What else did she teach you?" "She showed me where she hid snacks." Sophia's voice got a little stronger, like she was proud of remembering. "In my toy box under the stuffed animals, crackers and granola bars. She said it was our secret emergency kit. She told me to eat just a little bit every day if I ever had to hide." The image of Elizabeth carefully hiding food for her daughter, planning for the worst, made my chest ache so bad I could barely breathe. "What about water?" I asked gently. "At night, when the house got really quiet, I would sneak out and go to the bathroom. I drank from the sink and filled up my water bottle. Then I'd go back to the closet before it got light." She looked down at her hands. "I was so scared every time. But Mama said being brave means doing scary things when you have to." God, Elizabeth, what had you been living through? "The bunny helped too," Sophia added, reaching for it. The nurse had cleaned it up a bit, but you could still see where tears had darkened the blue fur. "Mama gave it to me when I was little. She said whenever I held it, I should pretend she was hugging me. So that's what I did every night." I had to look away for a moment, blinking hard against the tears. When I could trust my voice again, I asked the question I was afraid to hear answered. "Why didn't you try to leave, baby, or call for help?" Sophia's answer was simple, delivered with the pure faith of a child. "Mama said to wait for you. She said you'd come. She said you always keep your promises, and you promised to call every Friday. So if you didn't call, you'd come looking. She told me to wait for you, Grandma. Nobody else." The weight of that trust, Elizabeth's faith in me, Sophia's patience, nearly broke me right there. My daughter had spent the last months of her life teaching her child how to survive without her. She'd hidden food, rehearsed instructions, made plans for a future where she wouldn't be there. She'd known Ryan was dangerous, and she'd done everything she could to protect Sophia, but she hadn't been able to save herself. "You did so good, sweetheart," I whispered, taking Sophia's hand again. "Your mama would be so proud of you." Sophia's eyes started to close, exhaustion finally winning. The IV drip continued its steady rhythm. Her breathing deepened, and within minutes she was asleep. I sat there in that dim hospital room, watching her chest rise and fall, listening to the monitors beep their reassurance. She was alive. Against all odds, my granddaughter was alive. A soft knock on the door made me look up. A black man in his 40s stood in the doorway, wearing a gray suit and a concerned expression. Detective Shield clipped to his belt. "Ms. Mitchell?" he said quietly. "I'm Detective Noah Parker. Can we talk in the hall?" I glanced at Sophia one more time, still sleeping peacefully, monitors steady, then stood and followed him out. The hallway was bright and sterile, nurses moving past with clipboards and medicine carts. Detective Parker pulled out a small notebook, the kind that had seen a lot of use. "I need to ask you some questions about your daughter," he said. "About Elizabeth." I nodded, bracing myself. "When was the last time you actually saw her in person?" I thought back. 3 weeks. Sophia's birthday party. I remembered that day clearly now, details I hadn't paid attention to at the time suddenly sharp and significant. Elizabeth had looked tired, more than tired, worn down, distracted, but she'd smiled and served cake and sung happy birthday and said everything was fine. "Did you notice anything unusual? Anything that seemed off?" "She looked worried," I said slowly. "Kept checking her phone. And there was a moment when Sophia ran inside to get something, and I asked Elizabeth if everything was okay. She started to say something, then Ryan came out on the deck and she just stopped, changed the subject." Parker wrote something in his notebook. "What about Ryan Carter? When did you last speak to him?" "Last night, around 9:30. I called because Elizabeth wasn't answering her phone." I felt anger rising in my chest. "He said she and Sophia had gone on a trip, mother-daughter time, said they'd be back in a few days. But they weren't on a trip. No, Elizabeth's been missing from work since Monday, and Sophia was locked in a closet for 7 days. Parker's jaw tightened. "Can you tell me what Sophia said about how she ended up in that closet?" So I told him everything Sophia had shared, the emergency training, the snacks, the instructions to wait for me, and then the part that made my voice shake. She said she heard them that night, Ryan and a woman, arguing with Elizabeth about money. She heard her mama screaming, heard her begging them to stop. Parker's pen stopped moving. "A woman? Sophia specifically said a woman?" "Yes, Ryan and a woman." He pulled out his phone, typed something quickly. "Did Ryan ever mention anyone? An ex-girlfriend? A business partner?" I tried to remember. "There was a name Elizabeth mentioned once, Chelsea. She said Ryan got weird whenever the name came up. Chelsea. Parker, I think. Same last name as you." "No relation," he said dryly, but he was writing it down. "Chelsea Parker. We'll look into it." Through the window of Sophia's room, I could see her sleeping, still clutching that bunny. She was alive because Elizabeth had taught her how to hide, how to wait, how to survive. I turned back to Detective Parker and said the words I'd been avoiding since I found that empty house. "My daughter is dead, isn't she?" His expression answered before his words did. "We don't know yet, but based on what Sophia heard and the condition she was left in," he paused. "We're treating this as a homicide investigation. I need you to prepare yourself for that possibility." "It's not a possibility," I said, my voice hard as stone. "Ryan did this to her, him and that woman, and I need you to prove it." The next morning, after Sophia had slept 12 straight hours with IV fluids helping her small body recover, Detective Parker returned with a woman he introduced as Dr. Amanda Foster. She was younger than I expected, late 30s maybe, with kind eyes and a calm, gentle presence that immediately put me at ease. She carried a worn leather bag stuffed with art supplies. "Ms. Mitchell," Parker said, pulling me into the hallway. "There's an observation room next door, one-way glass. You can watch and listen, but Sophia needs to talk without you present. Kids sometimes hold back when family's in the room." Everything in me wanted to say no, wanted to stay right there beside my grandbaby. But I understood what he was saying. "I need to hear it," I said, "even if it destroys me." He led me to a small room next door. On my side, the window showed nothing but my own reflection, an old black woman with worry lines deep as rivers, eyes red from crying. On the other side, I could see into Sophia's room clearly. Dr. Foster settled into the chair beside Sophia's bed and spread out paper and colored pencils on the rolling tray table. "I heard you're very brave," she said softly. "Is it okay if we talk for a bit? You can draw while we talk if you want." Sophia nodded and chose a blue pencil, her mama's favorite color. "Can you draw what you remember from Saturday night?" Dr. Foster asked gently. "Just the people." Sophia's hand moved slowly across the paper. 3 stick figures appeared. Above them, in careful letters, she wrote, "Dad, a woman, Mom." "Tell me about Saturday night," Dr. Foster said. What do you remember? Sophia's voice was barely above a whisper. Dad and a woman came to the door. It was late after dinner. They were loud. What were they saying? They were yelling at Mom about money. The woman said Mom owed them something. Mom said no. She said she didn't have any money. My hands gripped the edge of the table in front of me. In the next room, Dr. Foster kept her voice calm and steady. What happened next? They got louder. Sophia pressed harder on the paper, darkening the figures. Dad was mad. He said Mom was ruining everything. The woman said Mom was selfish. She paused, her hand trembling on the pencil. Mom told them to leave. She said she was calling Grandma. God, Elizabeth had been trying to reach me, and I'd been 2.5 hours away, sitting in my kitchen, waiting for a phone call that would never come. What happened then? Dr. Foster asked. Sophia's voice cracked. I heard terrible sounds, things breaking, and Mama was crying. She was begging them to stop. She kept saying, please, please think of Sophia. Tears rolled down my face. I couldn't stop them. The woman said something, Sophia continued, her voice getting smaller. She said, we have to finish this. Dr. Foster handed her a tissue and waited while Sophia wiped her eyes. And then? She asked gently. Sophia stopped. Her whole body went rigid. Dr. Foster waited, patient and calm. And then Dad said, Sophia's voice was barely audible now. Dad said, I'm sorry, right before Mama stopped making any sound. I gripped the table so hard my knuckles went pale. In the observation room, Detective Parker stood beside me, his hand on my shoulder. 2 people, he murmured. Your son-in-law and a woman. We need to identify her. Chelsea, I said, my voice hoarse. Chelsea Parker. Ryan mentioned her once. Said she was an ex, that it was over. But Elizabeth told me he acted strange when her name came up. Parker made a note. We'll find her. The interview continued for another 20 minutes. Sophia described hiding in the closet, hearing footsteps in the hallway, hearing Ryan say they needed to clean up, hearing the woman mention a storage unit. When it ended, Dr. Foster spoke briefly with Parker. Then I was allowed back into the room. Sophia looked impossibly small in that hospital bed, surrounded by monitors and wires. When she saw me, she reached for my hand. I'm sorry, Grandma, she whispered. Baby, you have nothing to be sorry for, I said, pulling her close. Nothing. That night, while Sophia slept, I sat in the hospital cafeteria staring into my 4th cup of coffee. It had gone cold an hour ago, but I kept holding the cup anyway, needing something solid to grip. Detective Parker found me there around 8 p.m. He sat down across from me and placed a tablet on the table between us. I need to show you something, he said. It won't be easy. Show me. He opened a series of photos. Elizabeth's living room, the same one I'd stood in that morning. But these photos were different, taken under ultraviolet light. Purple-blue patterns glowed across the couch, the coffee table, the wall. Sprays, smears, areas where someone had tried to scrub clean but couldn't erase what had been there. Luminol, Parker said quietly. It reacts to blood, even when it's been cleaned. I stared at the images, at the evidence of violence painted in ghostly blue light across my daughter's living room, at the proof of her last moments. Your daughter fought back, Parker said. There are clear signs of a struggle, defensive patterns. He paused, and I knew what was coming before he said it. But we still haven't found her body. 5 weeks passed. 5 weeks of investigation, dead ends and sleepless nights in the chair beside Sophia's hospital bed, then beside her bed in my house after she was released. 5 weeks of my grandbaby asking when we could have a funeral for her mama, and me not having an answer. 5 weeks of knowing Elizabeth was gone but not knowing where, until Detective Parker's call came on a Tuesday morning. Dorothy, he said, and I could hear it in his voice. We found her. I had to sit down. Where? Anonymous tip from a storage facility manager outside the city. He noticed a smell coming from Unit 42. When we arrived with a warrant, he didn't finish, didn't need to. I'll be there in an hour, I said. Dorothy, you don't have to. Yes, I do. The county morgue sat in a low brick building behind Regional Hospital. Detective Parker waited for me in the parking lot, and we walked in together without saying much. What was there to say? Dr. Helen Martinez met us in a hallway lined with filing cabinets. She was maybe 50, with kind eyes and a professional manner that came from years of delivering the worst news imaginable. "Ms. Mitchell," she said, shaking my hand. "I'm so sorry for your loss." I nodded, not trusting my voice. She led us to a small viewing room. In the center sat a metal table covered by a white sheet. The shape underneath was unmistakable. "Are you ready?" Dr. Martinez asked. I would never be ready, but I nodded anyway. She pulled back the sheet, folding it carefully at Elizabeth's shoulders. My daughter looked like she was sleeping. Her face was peaceful, almost serene. Her dark hair had been brushed back from her forehead. She looked younger than 34. She looked like the girl who used to help me strip wire and ask endless questions about how electricity worked. Except for the marks around her neck. I couldn't look away from them. Faint bruising in a pattern I didn't want to understand but couldn't help recognizing. Someone's hands had been there. Someone had taken her last breath. "I can see she fought," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. The bruises on her arms told the story. Dr. Martinez nodded. "Defensive wounds. Your daughter fought very hard, Ms. Mitchell." I reached out slowly, hesitantly, and touched Elizabeth's hand. It was cold. So cold. This was the same hand that had gripped my finger when she was born. The same hand I'd held when I taught her to ride a bike. The same hand she'd raised at her nursing school graduation. "The official cause of death is asphyxiation," Dr. Martinez said, her tone clinical but gentle. "Based on lividity and body temperature at time of discovery, time of death was Saturday evening, approximately 10:30 p.m. Saturday, the night Sophia had hidden in her closet and listened to her mother die. We found DNA evidence under her fingernails," Dr. Martinez continued. "It's a match for Ryan Carter. She scratched him during the struggle." Good, I thought. Good. At least she'd left evidence. At least she'd marked the man who killed her. "The body was moved between 2 and 3 hours after death," Dr. Martinez added. "The storage unit was rented under a fake name, Michael Thompson, paid for in cash, 3 months up front. Premeditated," Detective Parker said quietly beside me. He had it planned. Something shifted inside me in that cold room. The grief that had been weighing me down for 5 weeks began to harden into something else, something sharper, more focused. Determination. I looked down at Elizabeth one more time, my strong, brave daughter who'd spent her last months teaching her child how to survive, who'd fought her killers even knowing she couldn't win, who'd loved Sophia enough to prepare her for the worst. I leaned down and kissed my daughter's forehead. Cold. So cold. "He will pay," I whispered against her skin. "Ryan Carter will spend the rest of his life in prison, thinking about what he did to you. I swear it." When I straightened up, Detective Parker was watching me carefully. "Justice," I said, meeting his eyes. "That's all I want now. Justice for my daughter." "You'll have it," Parker promised. "We'll make sure of it." I took one last look at Elizabeth, memorizing her face, storing it away with all my other memories of her. Then I turned and walked out of that morgue with a singular purpose burning in my chest. Behind me, Parker was already on his phone, calling the district attorney. Ahead of me lay a legal battle that would test everything I had. But I'd spent 40 years tracing faulty wiring back to its source. I knew how to find where things went wrong. I knew how to fix what was broken. And Ryan Carter, he was about to learn that you don't underestimate a black woman who spent her whole life being underestimated. He'd made the mistake of killing my daughter. He'd made the bigger mistake of leaving my granddaughter alive to tell the truth. And now he was going to pay for both. The week after I left the morgue, Detective Parker worked nonstop. Financial records, phone logs, witness interviews, building a case brick by brick. When he called and asked me to come to the station, I knew he'd found something big. The conference room walls were covered in paper. Bank statements, insurance documents, spreadsheets marked in yellow highlighter. Parker sat across from me with a thick folder open in front of him. "I want to show you what we've built," he said. "The motive, the planning, all of it." He slid the first document across the table, a life insurance policy. $500,000, Parker said. "Elizabeth took it out when Sophia was born. Standard term policy. She never changed the beneficiary." I stared at Ryan Carter's name listed as sole beneficiary. $500,000. That's what my daughter's life was worth to him. "He would have gotten all of it," I said quietly. "If she died. If it looked like natural causes or an accident, yes. Parker handed me another stack of papers. But here's where it gets interesting. Ryan had serious debt. He spread out credit reports and bank statements. The numbers made my head spin. Total debt, $385,000, Parker said. $250,000 lost in a Ponzi scheme. He was recruited by a man named Robert Miller, guaranteed cryptocurrency returns. The operation collapsed. Ryan lost everything he'd invested, plus money he'd borrowed to put in more. And the rest? Casino gambling, $135,000 in maxed credit cards and personal loans. The man was drowning, Dorothy. Parker turned his tablet toward me. Browser history from Ryan's laptop. 3 weeks before Elizabeth died, he searched. How long does life insurance pay out after death? My hands curled into fists on the table. He planned it. There's more. Parker passed me a handwritten statement. Your neighbor, Mrs. Gladys Whitmore, 70 years old, lives 2 doors down from Elizabeth. I nodded. Sweet woman who always waved from her porch. She saw a silver SUV parked outside Elizabeth's house that Saturday night around 10 p.m. Thought it was family visiting. It wasn't family. Parker pulled up grainy security footage on his tablet. The neighbor across the street has a camera. We pulled this. The video showed 2 vehicles in Elizabeth's driveway. Ryan's black sedan and a silver SUV. Timestamp 9:45 p.m. arrival, 11:30 p.m. departure. An hour after my daughter died. An hour spent cleaning up, moving her body, covering their tracks. We traced the SUV registration, Parker said. Chelsea Parker, 30 years old, lives about 40 minutes away. He showed me her driver's license photo. Blonde hair, hard eyes, thin face. Ryan's ex-girlfriend from 10 years ago. They broke up when he's married Elizabeth, but they reconnected recently. Over 200 calls between them in the last 3 months. Long calls. She helped him, I said. She had reason to. Parker's expression was grim. Chelsea Parker has gambling debts too, around $80,000. Together they were buried. That insurance policy looked like an escape hatch. I thought of Sophia's drawing, the woman at the door, the woman who said, "We have to finish this." Chelsea Parker had been there. She had helped murder my daughter. There's another piece, Parker said quietly. He slid a statement across the table. Grace Thompson, Elizabeth's colleague. I knew what was coming before he said it. Elizabeth came to Grace 2 weeks before she died. Upset. Ryan had asked her to increase the life insurance policy to $750,000. Elizabeth refused. She told Grace she was scared. The words hit like a physical blow. My daughter had known, had seen the danger, had tried to protect herself. When she refused to increase the policy, Parker continued, and likely started pulling away, Ryan couldn't risk losing control. If she changed the beneficiary or filed for divorce, he'd lose everything. So he killed her. We've issued an arrest warrant for Chelsea Parker, Parker said. She's not in custody yet, but we'll find her. He paused, and I saw something shift in his expression. And Ryan? His attorney posted bail this morning, $2 million. The room seemed to tilt. He's out? Ankle monitor, strict conditions. His lawyer argued he's not a flight risk since his daughter is here, and there's no direct eyewitness placing him at the moment of death. Parker's jaw tightened. The judge agreed. I stood so quickly my chair scraped across the floor. The man who killed my daughter is walking free? For now, Parker said evenly. But we're building a case that won't leave room for doubt. Financial motive, digital searches, surveillance footage, witness testimony, Sophia's statement. It will be airtight. I looked down at the table, the insurance policy, the debt statements, the browser history, a trail of greed and desperation mapped out in black ink and pixels. Ryan hadn't acted in rage. He had calculated, planned, weighed the cost against the payout, $500,000. That's the price he'd put on Elizabeth's life. We need to convict him, I said quietly. Not just arrest him, convict him. Parker nodded. That's exactly what we're going to do. Fighting the legal system felt like working on live wiring in the dark. Every time I thought I'd found the right connection, something else sparked and failed. 2 days after Ryan posted bail, his defense attorney made his move. Gerald Hawkins was exactly what I'd expected. Silver hair, tailored 3-piece suit, a man who billed more per hour than I used to earn in a week. He didn't hesitate. Ryan filed a police report claiming I had kidnapped Sophia from his house. Never mind that I'd found her half-starved in a closet after he'd abandoned her for 7 days. Never mind that he and Chelsea had murdered my daughter. According to his version, I was an unstable grandmother who had broken in and stolen his child. Then came the motions, filed so fast I could barely keep track. Motion to dismiss Sophia's testimony. Too young, too traumatized, unreliable. Motion to exclude the financial records. Circumstantial irrelevant asterisk. Motion for a restraining order. Dorothy Mitchell prohibited from coming within 500 feet of Ryan Carter, and then Ryan went on local television. I watched it at Grace's house, gripping the arm of her couch so hard my knuckles went white. Ryan sat in a neutral living room wearing a somber expression. "I'm innocent," he said calmly. "This is a tragedy for everyone involved, but my mother-in-law has never accepted me. Now she's using this situation to destroy my life. I loved Elizabeth. I would never hurt her." The reporter asked about Sophia. "I'm grateful she's safe," Ryan replied smoothly, "but she's traumatized. Children that age can be confused, especially when influenced by adults with their own agenda." I turned off the television before I threw something at it. The next morning, 2 officers knocked on my door. They needed to ask questions about my entry into Ryan Carter's residence. I sat in an interrogation room for 3 hours while they dissected every detail. Yes, I'd entered the house. Yes, I'd used the spare key Elizabeth had given me years ago. Yes, technically I had trespassed. "You understand this puts you in a difficult position," one officer said carefully. "Breaking and entering, potential custody interference. If you're perceived as unstable or aggressive, you could lose guardianship." The message was clear: back off or risk losing Sophia. That afternoon, I withdrew $5,000 from my retirement savings, money I'd set aside for emergencies, for Sophia's future, and hired Margaret Dawson, a family attorney Grace recommended. "You need protection," Margaret said at our first meeting. "Ryan's team will attack your credibility relentlessly. We have to be proactive." I signed the retainer agreement and tried not to think about what that money could have paid for instead. Grace came by that evening with a casserole and determination in her eyes. "I'll watch Sophia whenever you need," she said. "Emma's been good for her. They're close in age. Emma, her 12-year-old daughter, had been kind to Sophia from the start. Gentle, understanding. The kind of friend a traumatized child needs." "Elizabeth was like a sister to me," Grace added, her voice thick. "We worked together for 8 years. She told me everything. I know what Ryan is. I know what he did. I'll help you however I can." It was the first real warmth I'd felt since this nightmare began. But even Grace's support couldn't silence the rumors spreading through the community. Some neighbors saw me as a bitter old woman with a vendetta. Ryan's public relations campaign was effective. A polished financial advisor, a grieving widower. How could someone like that commit murder? I stopped going to Greater Hope Baptist. Couldn't endure the sideways glances, the conversations that hushed when I walked by. Detective Parker called one evening with a warning. "Dorothy, I believe you, but belief isn't enough. We need evidence, not emotion. Don't give Ryan ammunition. He's trying to paint you as unstable. Don't help him." I promised to be careful, but the pressure kept building. 2 months into the investigation, Ryan's lawyer filed a motion to dismiss the entire case. Lack of evidence, they claimed, and the judge was listening. I sat in the courtroom gallery that day, hands clenched on the wooden bench, watching Gerald Hawkins make his argument. "Your Honor, the prosecution's case rests entirely on circumstantial evidence. There is no eyewitness to the alleged crime. No murder weapon has been recovered. My client has provided no confession. The testimony of a traumatized 10-year-old child, while tragic, cannot be the sole basis for a first-degree murder charge." Carol Bennett, the district attorney, stood to argue back. She was good. I'd seen her work before. But even I could see the judge's skeptical expression. "The court will take this under advisement," the judge said finally. "I'll issue my ruling within 48 hours. The gavel came down and my stomach dropped with it. Outside the courthouse, Parker pulled me aside. "We might lose this, Dorothy. I'm sorry." "No," I cut him off. "Not after we've come this far. There has to be something. Some piece we're missing." "If there is," Parker said, "we'll find it. But we're running out of time." That night I couldn't sleep. I sat at my kitchen table at 1 a.m, surrounded by copies of every financial document Parker had shown me. I'd been through them a dozen times already, but I spread them out again, looking for anything. any detail I might have missed. That's when I saw it. Buried in Ryan's bank statements from 8 months ago, a deposit for $95,000. The notation read, MZ Consulting. I stared at it, my tired brain trying to make the connection. Parker had mentioned this. I'd seen it before. But what was MZ Consulting? I grabbed my phone and called Parker. He answered on the third ring, voice thick with sleep. Dorothy, it's past midnight. That deposit, I said, the $95,000 from MZ Consulting. What if it's connected to Ryan's debts? What if it's not legitimate business income? There was a pause. Then rustling like Parker was sitting up in bed. Hold on, let me pull up the file. I waited, my heart pounding while he searched through his computer. MZ Consulting, Parker said slowly. I flagged it as unusual income, but Ryan's tax returns showed it as consulting fees. We didn't dig deeper because we were focused on the debts, not the income, I finished. Can you dig deeper now? I'll start first thing in the morning. He called me back 6 hours later. I hadn't gone to bed. Dorothy, Parker's voice was electric with excitement. You might have just saved this case. What did you find? MZ Consulting is a shell company, and it's connected to a Ponzi scheme investigation the FBI has been running for 2 years. The same scheme Ryan lost money in. My breath caught. He wasn't just a victim. Exactly. Ryan wasn't just a victim. He was a recruiter. He brought in 12 people, earned 8% commission on every dollar they invested. Do the math on 12 people investing an average of $100,000 each. $96,000. The mysterious MZ Consulting deposit. 2 hours later, I was sitting in a conference room at the FBI field office. Across from me sat Gerald Patterson, a 45-year-old accountant with tired eyes and a worn face. Ms. Mitchell, Gerald said, shaking my hand. Detective Parker told me about your daughter. I'm so sorry for your loss. Thank you. Your son-in-law cost me everything, Gerald continued, his voice bitter. I lost $180,000 in that Ponzi scheme. My retirement, my kids' college fund, everything I'd worked for. He pulled out a folder thick with documents. But here's what you need to understand. Ryan Carter wasn't a victim like the rest of us. He was part of it. He recruited 12 people into that scheme, including me. He earned commission on every person he brought in, 8% of every dollar. Who did he target? I asked, though I thought I already knew. Elderly people, mostly. Immigrants who trusted him because he spoke their language. People who believed he was trying to help them. Gerald's voice shook with anger. If Ryan Carter could steal the life savings of strangers without blinking, imagine what he'd be capable of doing to his own wife. The pieces clicked into place. This wasn't just a desperate man who'd killed for insurance money. This was a pattern, a history of calculated cruelty. Evidence that Ryan Carter was exactly the kind of person who could plan and execute murder. 48 hours after the hearing, I was back in that courtroom. But this time, Carol Bennett had new evidence to present. Gerald Patterson's testimony, the FBI's investigation. Proof that Ryan wasn't a desperate victim, but a habitual criminal who'd been conning people for years. The judge looked over the documents for what felt like an eternity. Then he looked up. Based on the new evidence presented regarding the defendant's pattern of criminal behavior, the motion to dismiss is denied. This case will proceed to trial. For the first time since this nightmare began, I saw Ryan's face go pale. The confident smirk he'd worn throughout the hearing vanished. As the bailiff let him out, Ryan turned and looked back at me. Our eyes met. And in that moment, I saw real fear. The trial began on a cold November morning, 12 months after I'd found Sophia in that closet. The courthouse was packed. Reporters, curious onlookers, people who'd followed the case in the news. I sat in the front row with Grace beside me. Sophia had stayed home with Emma. We'd decided she didn't need to see any of this until it was her turn to testify. Carol Bennett's opening statement was powerful and clear. This is a case about greed, she told the jury, about a man who looked at his wife and saw only a paycheck. $500,000. That's the price Ryan Carter believed Elizabeth Mitchell Carter's life was worth. She walked them through the evidence methodically. The debt, the browser searches, the life insurance policy, the security footage showing 2 vehicles at the house the night Elizabeth died. Gerald Hawkins, Ryan's attorney, countered with his own narrative. Ryan was a victim too, manipulated by Chelsea Parker, the real killer. He was in another room when Elizabeth died. He didn't know what Chelsea was doing until it was too late. The first witnesses were forensic experts, showing the luminol photos of Elizabeth's living room, the ghostly blue evidence of violence, the proof of her final struggle. Mrs. Gladys Whitmore testified about the silver SUV she'd seen that night. Her grandson Logan, 16 now, described seeing two people carrying something large wrapped in a tarp to the vehicle. Grace took the stand, dabbing at her eyes with tissue. Elizabeth came to me 2 weeks before she died, Grace testified. She told me Ryan was demanding she increase her life insurance to $750,000. She refused. She was afraid of him. Then came trial day 3, the day Sophia testified. The courtroom was more crowded than before. Rumor had spread that a 10-year-old child would testify against her own father. I arrived early with Sophia. She wore a simple blue dress, her hair pulled back in a neat ponytail. The stuffed bunny was tucked in my purse, just in case. Judge Morrison had offered a privacy screen, something many courts use for child witnesses. But Sophia refused. "No screen," she'd said, her voice small but firm. "I want to look at him." I was terrified and proud in equal measure. When it was time, Sophia walked into that courtroom with her head high, though I could see her hands trembling. She was so small she needed a footstool to reach the microphone. Carol Bennett approached gently. "Hi, Sophia. Can you tell the jury where you were on Saturday, November 18th of last year?" "In my room." Sophia's voice was quiet but clear. Then I heard yelling downstairs. "What did you hear?" "My dad and a woman. They were yelling at my mom really loud, arguing about money." "What did your mother say?" "Mom kept saying no, that she wouldn't help them anymore." Carol nodded encouragingly. "What happened next?" "Mom had told me before. If I ever heard loud arguing, I should hide in my closet and not come out until she called me. So I did that." "What did you hear from inside the closet?" Sophia's hands gripped the edge of the witness box. "Scary sounds, things breaking, and Mom was crying. She was begging them to stop." Several jurors were already crying. "Did your mother stop making sounds?" Sophia nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Yes. After my dad said, 'I'm sorry,' everything went quiet." I glanced at Ryan. His jaw was clenched so tight I thought it might snap. Carol let the silence stretch. Then, "Sophia, how long were you in that closet?" My granddaughter's voice broke. 7 days. I waited for Mom to call me out like she promised, but she never did." "Who finally found you?" Sophia looked directly at me. "My grandma. She never gave up." Gerald Hawkins tried his cross-examination gently, but Sophia didn't waver. "Isn't it possible you heard things wrong?" he asked. "It was nighttime. You were scared." "I know my dad's voice," Sophia said, suddenly strong, "and I know when he's lying." As she left the stand, Sophia stopped. The whole courtroom held its breath. She looked directly at Ryan. "Mom forgave him," she said clearly. "But I don't." Then she walked out, hand in Dr. Foster's. The silence was absolute. Chelsea Parker was arrested 3 weeks into the trial after a manhunt that covered 3 states. She'd dyed her hair dark, lost weight, looked nothing like her driver's license photo. When she took the stand as part of her plea deal, she was already convicted, 25 years for second-degree murder in exchange for testimony. Her testimony sealed Ryan's fate. After she died, Chelsea said, tears streaming. "We were carrying her out to my SUV. I heard a noise from upstairs. I asked Ryan, 'What about Sophia? Is she home?' The courtroom leaned forward. 'What did Ryan say?' Carol asked. Chelsea's voice broke. He said, 'I'll never forget. She's probably at a sleepover. Even if she's here, by the time anyone finds anything, we'll be in Mexico with the money.' Several jurors gasped. Ryan had known, had heard something upstairs, and deliberately chose to leave his daughter to die rather than check on her. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they returned at 8 p.m., the foreperson, a woman in her 50s, stood and read the verdict. In the case of the state of Tennessee versus Ryan Carter, on the charge of premeditated murder resulting in death, we find the defendant guilty. The courtroom erupted. I closed my eyes and felt tears of relief stream down my face. Guilty on all counts. Conspiracy, child endangerment, everything. 2 weeks later, at sentencing, the judge looked at Ryan with disgust. "Ryan Carter, you took your wife's life in a calculated, premeditated act for financial gain. You showed no remorse. You left your daughter to die. I sentence you to life in prison without the possibility of parole." Ryan exploded, shouting about injustice as officers dragged him from the courtroom. Outside, reporters swarmed, but I walked past them without a word. Grace waited with Sophia. My grandbaby ran into my arms. "Is it over, Grandma?" "Yes, sweetheart," I said, holding her tight. "It's over. He can never hurt anyone again." 6 months later, 6 months after Ryan Carter was sentenced to life in prison, people still ask me how I keep going, how I move forward after losing my daughter. The truth is, you don't move on from losing a child. You learn to carry it differently. You find new reasons to wake up each morning. For me, that reason has a name: Sophia. We built a new life together in my house on Oakwood Avenue. I renovated Elizabeth's old bedroom for her, painted it soft blue, her mama's favorite color, installed shelves for her books and drawings, put up photos of Elizabeth everywhere so Sophia would grow up surrounded by her mother's smile. Sophia started 5th grade at the local elementary school. Her best friend is Emma, Grace's daughter. Every Saturday they take art classes together at the community center. Therapy with Dr. Foster continues, monthly now instead of weekly. The nightmares come maybe once a month instead of every night. Sophia laughs more. God, I treasure that sound. She still keeps her blue bunny but doesn't clutch it constantly. She talks about Elizabeth openly now. "Grandma, remember when Mama taught me to make pancakes?" She's learning she can be happy without feeling guilty. My own healing is messier. The pain is still there. Probably always will be. But I've found purpose in raising Sophia, in honoring Elizabeth's memory. One Saturday morning in my garage, I found myself teaching Sophia the same way I'd taught her mother decades before. Sophia sat on a wooden stool, small hands covered in grease, face scrunched in concentration as she studied the lamp we were fixing together. She looked exactly like Elizabeth at that age. "This blue wire connects to the neutral," I explained. "See? Because everything needs a path to return to, right?" Sophia said. I smiled through the ache in my chest. "Exactly, baby, you sound just like your mama. Is that okay?" "That's the best thing you could possibly be." We worked in comfortable silence before she asked, "Grandma, why does Miss Grace help us so much?" She didn't have to. I set down my tools. "Because your mama loved people well, sweetheart. She took care of Grace when Grace's husband was sick. She was always there for everyone. And when you love people well, they love you back." Sophia frowned. "But Mama's gone. How can they still love her?" "Love doesn't disappear when someone dies, baby. It just grows. Like an electrical current. It keeps flowing through everyone who's connected." Her face brightened. "So we're all connected? Like wires?" "Exactly like wires." Later that week, I visited Elizabeth's grave alone. The small cemetery was quiet, peaceful. I sat beside the headstone, tracing her name with my finger. "I got justice for you, baby girl," I whispered. "Ryan will spend the rest of his life in a cell thinking about what he did. I hope it haunts him every single day." My voice cracked. "Sophia's doing okay. She's strong like you. I'm teaching her electrical work. She's good at it. Smart, just like her mama. I miss you every day, but I'm taking care of her. I promise." People ask me how I keep going. The answer is simple. I have to. For Sophia, for Elizabeth's memory. Ryan took my daughter, but he couldn't take our love, couldn't take our family, couldn't take our hope. The pain doesn't disappear. You just learn to carry it differently. Every Friday at 6 o'clock, I still expect the phone to ring. Of course it doesn't. But sometimes when Sophia's laughing in the next room or showing me something she built, I feel Elizabeth there, in the sunlight through the window, in the warmth of family at Grace's Sunday dinners, in the connections that death cannot sever. We talk about Elizabeth often, the skilled nurse, the loving mother, the woman who taught her child how to survive even when she couldn't survive herself. That's her legacy, not how she died, but how she lived, how she loved, how she prepared her daughter for a world without her. Sophia finished wiring the lamp that Saturday morning. She plugged it in and flipped the switch. Light flooded the garage. "I did it! It works!" she shouted. "You certainly did, baby. Your mama would be so proud." She threw her arms around me. "I love you, Grandma." "I love you too, Sophia. Always. And to you, listening to this story, remember this. I spent a year chasing justice for my daughter, and I got it. Ryan Carter sits in a prison cell for the rest of his life, But if I could go back, I would tell myself one thing. Trust your instincts sooner. The signs were there. The uncomfortable feeling at the wedding. The way Ryan's eyes shifted when he talked about money. The tension in Elizabeth's voice during our last phone calls. I saw them all, but I told myself I was being paranoid. Overprotective. I didn't want to interfere in my daughter's life. Don't be like me. Don't wait until it's too late. This story taught me that evil doesn't always announce itself with horns and fangs. Sometimes it wears a charming smile and calls you Mom. My fight for justice wasn't about hatred. It was about protecting the innocent and ensuring the guilty face consequences. But justice, even righteous justice, doesn't bring back what you've lost. It only ensures the darkness doesn't spread further. Looking back, I realized that Elizabeth prepared Sophia not just for 7 days in a closet, but for a lifetime without her. She knew something was wrong. She tried to protect her child the only way she could. That's the power of a mother's love. It transcends death itself. If something feels wrong in your life, in your family, in your relationships, listen to that voice, that prickling at the base of your skull, that electrical hum in the air that tells you something's about to short out. Don't ignore it. Trace it back to its source. Fix it before the whole house burns down. My daughter Elizabeth once told me she wanted to help people the way I fix things, make them work again when they're broken. She did that. She healed people every day at Regional Hospital. And even in death, she's still healing, teaching us about love, about preparation, about fighting for those who can't fight for themselves. Sophia and I are building a good life. Not a perfect life. We'll never have that again. But a good one. An honest one. One filled with love and laughter and Sunday dinners with people who knew Elizabeth and keep her memory alive. Every morning when I wake up, I thank God for one thing, that I trusted my instincts enough to drive to Elizabeth's house that Saturday morning, that I didn't wait another day, that I got there in time to save Sophia. 7 days. My grandbaby survived 7 days because her mama loved her enough to teach her how to wait for me. And now I'm teaching Sophia how to connect wires, how to trace circuits back to their source, how to fix what's broken. Just like her mama, just like her great-grandma, just like me, because everything connects. You just have to know where to look. And love doesn't end when the phone stops ringing. It just finds a new way to call.